Most men would have ridden past. He didn't. Most men would have taken what they wanted when no one was watching. He didn't. Most men, when a woman told them, "Please don't," would have done it anyway, and called it helping. Silas Hole sat down on a cold floor outside a stranger's door and stayed there all night. Not because he had to, because he'd failed to stay once before, and he swore he'd never make that mistake again. What this story teaches us: the most powerful thing a person can do for someone who's been broken by the world is simply refuse to leave. This channel exists for the stories that remind us what people are capable of. The cowboy who chooses gentleness, the mother who never stops grieving, the woman who rebuilds herself stitch by stitch, and the love that grows quietly in the hardest places. If this story reached something in you, subscribe, share it forward, leave a like, and tell me in the comments what city you're watching from. I want to know how far these stories travel.
The trail to Copper Creek was less a road and more a crack in the scorched earth, baked by 6 weeks without a drop of rain. Silas rode it like he did everything else, slow and by himself. His horse, a buckskin named Drummer, suddenly pulled up short. The horse locked his legs and would not budge an inch, his ears pinned back. "What in the world?" Silas grumbled, leaning over the saddle. Ahead he spotted a pile of dark cloth in the dust about 30 yards out. It was too large to be a coyote, and far too still to be alive. But Drummer smelled something, and that horse never spooked at anything already gone. Silas dismounted, tied the reins to a rock, and walked on. The sun felt like a branding iron on his neck. When he finally got close, he saw her. A woman, face down in the dirt, her arms stretched out as if she had been crawling. She wore a heavy, long-sleeved wool dress buttoned clear to her throat, soaked through with sweat. Her hair was a mess of dust and dried blood. One of her shoes was gone. He knelt down beside her. "Ma'am, can you hear me?" There was no answer. He touched her shoulder and pulled his hand back fast. Her skin was not just hot, it was like a fire. He gently turned her over. Her face was red and blistered, her lips cracked and white. A tiny sound escaped her, barely a word. "No. Easy now," he said softly. "I am not going to hurt you." Her eyes fluttered open, a wild, gray-green color. She stared at him with the kind of pure fright a cornered animal shows. "What is your name?" he asked her. She did not say a word. Instead, her hand rose, shaking, and she clutched the collar of that awful dress, pulling it even tighter. "All right," Silas said. "I'm going to pick you up. I have got water and a horse. You're going to be fine." He lifted her, surprised at how little she weighed, like a sick child. He got her situated on Drummer, who stood perfectly still for once. He climbed up behind her, and the heat pouring off her body was staggering, trapped by that thick wool. The dress was killing her. He reached for the top button. Suddenly she came alive, twisting with a strength he could not believe. She clawed at his hand, screaming a raw, ragged sound that made his blood run cold. "Do not!" she cried out. "Please do not take it off!" Silas yanked his hand away as if he had touched a hot skillet. She collapsed back against him, shaking all over. "Okay," he said, his voice low. "Okay. It stays on. Do you hear me? It stays on." She went limp against him, her breathing quick and shallow. Silas looked down at the heavy wool collar in the 100-degree heat and felt a deep chill. It was a feeling he had not had since Emmeline. He urged Drummer forward and rode for his ranch, carrying a stranger in a dress that made no sense, running from a feeling he did not want to name. The ranch house sat where Copper Creek used to run wide. Now the creek was just a ribbon of water, and the pastures were the color of dry straw. He carried the woman to the back room, the one that had belonged to Emmeline. He laid her on the bed and began the work of trying to cool her down. The dress was the problem. It was a furnace. But he had given his word. And Silas Hole, for all his faults, was a man who kept his promises. He soaked the outside of the fabric with cool water from the basin. He packed wet rags around her ankles and used a spoon to drip water onto her cracked lips. Even unconscious, she fought him. Any time his hand got near the collar or the cuffs, she would flinch, her fingers grabbing the cloth. For 3 long days, she burned with fever, thrashing and whispering the same words in the dark. "Please do not take it off." The phrase echoed in his mind while he worked, while he sat on the porch at night, staring up at the stars and thinking about things he tried to forget. On the 4th morning, he walked in with a bowl of broth and found her awake. She was huddled in the corner of the bed, her knees to her chest, her eyes tracking his every move. Silas paused in the doorway, holding up the bowl. "Broth," he said. "Just beef and salt." She did not move. He placed the bowl on the nightstand and took a few steps back until he was against the far wall. "My name is Silas Hole," he said. "This is my place. You are about 4 miles from a town called Ridgewater. You have been out for 3 days. I have not touched your dress, and I am not going to." She watched his face for a long time, searching for a lie. He just stood there and let her look. "I do not expect your trust," he said, "but I expect you to eat. That broth is getting cold." Something changed in her eyes. It was not trust, but it was a start. She reached for the bowl, her hand shaking so much the broth sloshed. She drank it slowly, never looking away from him. When she was done, she set the bowl down. "Kora," she said, "it is what I go by." "Fair enough." He picked up the bowl. "There is more when you are ready." He started to leave, but her voice stopped him at the door. It was thin, almost a whisper. "Why did you stop?" He turned back. "Stop what?" "The dress," she said. "You could have taken it off. I was too weak to stop you." A knot tightened in his chest. "I know," he said quietly. "That is exactly why I did not." He shut the door and went out to the porch, gripping the railing until his knuckles were white. Then he punched a wooden post, splitting the skin. He was not mad at her. He was mad at himself, and at the memory of seeing that same fear in another woman's eyes long ago, a time when he had not done enough. A couple of weeks went by. Kora was like a ghost in the house, always quiet, always watchful. The drought got worse. The creek nearly vanished. He lost 2 more cattle to the thirst. One evening, Silas came in bone-tired and covered in grime after dealing with another dead animal. He slumped into a chair at the table. "You lost another one," Kora said from the doorway. He looked up. She was still in that dress. "Yeah, 3rd one this month." "Your water's too low," she stated. He almost laughed. "You think I do not know that?" "No," she said, and her voice had a new edge to it. "I mean, you are digging in the wrong spot. The spring that feeds the creek shifted. It happens out here. The water moves underground." Silas just stared at her. "And how would you know that?" She glanced away. "I just know things." "That is not much of an answer." "It is the only one you are getting," she replied. He looked at her for a long moment, then slowly stood up. "All right. Kora who knows things," he said. "Show me." She hesitated, a silent battle playing out in her eyes. Finally, she nodded. She led him past the barn to a low patch of ground where the grass was a shade greener than anywhere else. She knelt down and placed her hand flat on the dry dirt. "Dig here," she said. "About 5, maybe 6 feet. You will find it." "Don't," she told him, her eyes fixed on his. "You will just lose a day's work." But he dug anyway. He worked straight through till sunset, and at 5.5 feet deep, muddy water started to well up. Come morning, it was a real well. Silas stared down at the dark water, then glanced over at Kora on the porch. He thought he saw the faintest hint of a smile. "Well, I will be," he muttered. "You probably will be," she said, "just not today." That night, her screams jolted him from his sleep. He was up in an instant, grabbing a lamp and stopping cold at her door. The screaming was gone, but a low, desperate whisper had taken its place. "Please do not take it off. Please do not." He knew he could not go in. Forcing his way into a woman's fear only breaks things for good. So he just sat down, put his back to her door, and he waited. He listened to her plead and cry until the house fell quiet again. He stayed right there as his legs went to sleep and his back began to ache. When the first hint of daylight appeared, the door creaked open behind him. Kora stood there, her eyes puffy and red, a hand clutching her collar. "You stayed?" she whispered. "I stayed. But why?" He pushed himself up, his bones creaking in protest. He met her gaze and told her the plain truth. "Because the last person who needed me to stay, I left. I went off looking for a fight, and she died because of it." The hardness in Kora's face softened just a bit. "Who?" "My sister, Emaine." After a moment she asked, "What happened to her?" He headed for the kitchen to put on some coffee, and Kora followed, sitting at the table. The story came out slow and hard, like pulling rusted nails. She married a respected merchant, Virgil Cates. Man sat in the front pew at church. Everybody thought he was something special, but he was not. He held his coffee cup tight. Emaine came to me for help twice. The first time with a bruise on her arm. She swore she just fell. The second time she had a busted lip and a look in her eye. A look just like yours. Kora winced but held his gaze. "I saw red," Silas continued. "I marched right down to his store in broad daylight and beat him near to death. Figured I was saving her. You were not? I made everything worse. The town took his side and the sheriff threw me in jail. While I was locked up, Virgil sent Emaine up north where I could not get to her. The coffee sat untouched. She sent one letter saying she was fine, but her handwriting was all shaky and I knew better. Kora whispered, 'I know.' 3 months later, they pulled her from a river, called it an accident. Virgil even put on a big show at the funeral, and you? I knew what really happened, but I had no proof. By the time I learned that, patience was the right way to handle things. She was already gone." He looked directly at Kora. "I learned a hard lesson. Being angry is not the same as being helpful. And sometimes the best a man can do is just sit quiet and listen." The only sound was the heat pressing in on the little kitchen. Kora's hands were flat on the table, her sleeves pulled down tight. "The man I am running from," she began, "he is a lot like your Virgil. He is a respected man, a man whose word is gospel." She opened her eyes, and he saw everything she could not say. "That is why it is impossible." Silas just met her stare and gave a slow nod. "Impossible is not the same thing as hopeless," he said quietly. Kora did not reply, her knuckles white as she gripped the table edge. The heavy dress seemed to stick to her skin in the suffocating heat. She stayed right there, and for now, that was enough. They both knew a powerful man was out there searching for his property. He was coming, just not today. A week went by, and while Kora still did not sleep well, something between them had shifted. She no longer shied away when he was near, and she stopped jumping at sudden movements. She kept wearing that heavy wool dress, which made no sense in the summer heat. It was less like she was hiding, and more like she could not break the habit. Silas saw it all but said nothing. Then, on a Tuesday morning, hot enough to melt tar, he announced, "I am heading into Ridgewater for supplies." "Anything you need?" Kora was staring out the window at the dust devils. She turned around. "I need you to get some cotton fabric, a light color, enough for a whole dress." Silas was surprised. "I want to make something I can breathe in," she said, pulling at her collar. "This thing is suffocating me." "Then why wear it?" "Because what is under it feels worse." Her tone left no room for argument. "But I figure if I make a new one myself with my own hands, maybe I can take this one off without feeling bare to the world." Silas grabbed his hat. "What color?" "It does not matter." "It matters to me," he said firmly. "What color?" She hesitated for a second. "Blue," she said softly. "A light blue, like the sky at dawn." He bought the fabric, along with thread, needles, and some ribbon. He did not know the first thing about sewing, but he reckoned a woman trying to put herself back together deserved good tools to do it. When he returned, he put the package on the table. Kora opened it and traced the pattern of the cotton. A softness came over her face he had never seen as she pressed the fabric to her cheek. "Thank you. It is only cloth." "No," she said, her voice thick. "It is not." That evening she began to cut the pattern while Silas cleaned his gear. The quiet between them was finally comfortable. "You are good with those scissors," he commented. "My mother was a seamstress," she said, her hands moving with purpose. "She taught me early. Said a woman who can sew is never truly helpless." Smart lady. She was. She passed before all this. That is a mercy. Silas put down his work. "Can I ask you something?" "You can ask. This man you are running from, does he know you are here?" Her scissors went still. "No." "You sure?" "He does not know yet, but he will come looking. He always does." She put the scissors down, her eyes fixed on the half-cut dress pattern. "Not because he wants me, but because I know things. Things that could tear his world down. And a man like that will not let you walk away with his secrets." "What kind of things?" She looked right at him. "The kind that gets a woman killed for knowing them." The clock on the wall seemed to tick louder. Outside, a horse stomped a hoof. Silas felt that old anger rise up in his chest, a familiar fire he had to shove back down. "All right," he said. "You tell me when you can. I will be right here." "That is not a promise with conditions, Kora." She picked up the scissors again. Her hands were steady this time, and he saw the barest hint of something at the corner of her mouth. It was not a smile, not yet, but it was the place a smile could grow. The next morning, Silas was out digging post holes for a new fence line when he heard a horse on the road. He stood up straight, wiping sweat from his brow. A rider was coming slow from Ridgewater. A big man on a gray horse wearing a dark coat that was too thick for this heat. A knot tightened in Silas's gut. The rider pulled up at the gate and tipped his hat. "Morning. You Silas Holt?" "Depends on who is asking. The name is Dalton. I am a deputy out of Helena." He settled in his saddle. "Looking for a woman. Went missing about 6 weeks back. Her husband is mighty worried." Silas leaned on his post-hole digger, his face a perfect blank. "A lot of women out here, Mr. Dalton. This one is specific, small, with brown hair. She might be using another name. Her husband says she is not right in the head, says she's confused, and dangerous." Silas let that word hang in the air. "That is what the husband says. He is a judge, actually. Judge Edmund Ashworth from Silver Falls. A respected man. Just wants his poor wife home." Silas felt his blood run cold. A judge. "A man people respect," she had said. "His word is law," and she meant it. "Cannot say I have seen anyone like that," Silas said, "but I will keep an eye out." Dalton's gaze lingered on him, then drifted past to the house. He stared at the window where Silas prayed Kora was smart enough to hide. "Appreciate it," Dalton said. "If you happen to see her, the judge has the legal right to take her back. She was in a facility for treatment and left without permission. She is technically a fugitive." "A fugitive?" Silas repeated the word softly. "I know how it sounds. But the law is the law, Mr. Holt. Especially out here," Silas said quietly. Dalton tipped his hat again and rode off. Silas watched him disappear over the hill. Then he dropped his tool and strode to the house. Kora was in the kitchen. She had heard it all. She was gripping the counter so hard her knuckles were white, like she was holding on to keep the world from falling away. "A judge," Silas said. "Judge Edmund Ashworth." "Yes, and you were in a facility." Kora lifted her chin, her eyes flashing. "I was in a building with bars on the windows. There was no trial. They told me I was hysterical. They told me I was a danger. They said my own words proved I was sick. Her voice trembled. That is not being committed, Silas. That is being buried alive while the man with the shovel holds a piece of paper that says he is allowed to do it. He felt a rage so pure it made his hands shake. He sat down and pressed them flat against the table. Tell me, he said. Tell me all of it, because that man will be back, and I need to know exactly what we are up against. Kora sat down across from him. My real name is Anne-Marie Holloway. I married Judge Edmund Ashworth 3 years ago. He was educated, charming. I thought I was the luckiest woman alive for about 4 months. What happened then? I found his ledger. What ledger? Edmund runs a place he calls the Ashworth Home for Wayward Women. Families pay him to take women they find inconvenient. Wives who talk back, daughters who will not obey, sisters who inherit money their brothers want. Silas's jaw set like stone. And what does he do to them there? Kora's eyes looked far away, seeing something awful. Some of them are drugged until they forget their own names. Some are locked in rooms so small they cannot even stand. Some of them... She stopped, her hand moving to her shoulder. Some of them are marked. Marked how? Branded. The word was flat. Dead. Like cattle. A letter is burned right into their skin. H for hysteric. It is so they can never escape what he says they are. So if they run, they are returned to him. The kitchen was deathly quiet. Silas just stared, his vision blurring with tears he refused to let fall. How many women? He asked, his voice thick. When I found the ledger, it had 43 names. 12 of them were crossed out. Crossed out means they were gone. It means they did not survive his treatment. It means they were buried in unmarked graves, and their families were told they died from a fever. Silas shot up from his chair, turning away to grip the window frame. He felt a blind fury building inside him, the same fire that had cost him so much before. Silas. He did not turn. Silas, look at me. He finally turned. Kora was standing, her eyes locked on his. I have seen that look in a man's eyes before, she said softly. That rage is not going to save me. I need you to be smart, Silas, not angry. Her words cut through his anger like cold water. He closed his eyes and took a deep breath. You are right, he said. I am sorry. Do not be sorry. Be smart. He sat back down. All right, let us be smart. That deputy, Dalton, said Ashworth has a commitment order. That is his legal power. If he finds you, no lawman will stop him from taking you. That is right. So we have to find a way to break that power. We have to get the law on our side. And how do we do that, when the man we are fighting is the law? Silas rubbed his tired face. There is a man in Ridgewater, a lawyer named Howard Mlin. He is not fancy, but he is honest, and he despises judges. Why? A judge in Billings took his family's ranch in a land dispute 20 years ago. Mlin has been fighting the system ever since. He is the kind of man who will listen to a story like yours and get angry enough to help. We will start there with one honest man. Kora was silent for a long time. There is more, she finally said. Tell me. The night I escaped, there was a fire. I did not start it. Another woman did. Ruth Beckons. She had been there 2 years. She is the one who showed me the ledger. Did she get out? Kora's face grew tight. I do not know. I remember smoke, and someone pushing me toward a window. I remember Ruth's voice yelling, "Run and do not ever stop." Then I was on the road, and you found me. Did you bring the ledger? No. It was locked in his office. I only saw it that one time. But I memorized it. The names, the dates, the women who were crossed out. She touched her temple. It is all right here. That is it, Silas said, a new energy in his voice. That is your weapon. That is what he is so afraid of. That is why he will never, ever stop looking for you. Then we had better get moving. The next morning, they rode into Ridgewater. Kora wore the unfinished wool dress and a wide-brimmed hat Silas gave her. She looked like any other rancher's wife in town for supplies. No one gave them a second look, except for Margaret Tierney. Margaret ran the general store, and not much got past her. When they walked in, her sharp eyes went from the heavy wool dress to Kora's flushed face and back to the dress. "Silas Holt," Margaret said from behind the counter. "Since when do you bring company to town?" "Since today, Margaret. This is Kora. She is staying out at the ranch. Is she now?" Margaret gave Kora a look that was not mean, just thorough. "Honey, are you not about to faint in that thing? It has got to be 102 degrees out there." Kora touched her collar. "I am fine, ma'am." "No, you are not. But I suppose that is your own business." Margaret turned back to Silas. "Melian's office is up the street, if that is who you are here to see." "How did you know?" "Because you have that look on your face, the one you get right before you go and stir up a whole mess of trouble. He will. He will find me." Back in Ridgewater, Silas found Margaret at her general store. "That deputy, Dalton, was in town yesterday," he said quietly. "He was asking questions." Margaret's face turned to stone. "He was. Asking about a missing woman, said her husband was anxious to have her back." She cut her eyes toward Kora. "I told him I had not seen a soul like that, and so did everyone else on this street." "Why?" Margaret slapped her glass down on the counter. "Because I have been married 31 years, Silas, and I know the difference between a worried man and a hunter. The way he talked about her, like she was a stray cow. It was wrong." Kora's eyes welled up, and she quickly looked away. "Now, do not you start crying in here," Margaret said, though her voice was kind. "Save those tears for when they matter." Silas gave Kora's shoulder a quick, light squeeze. He noticed she did not pull away. She knew he saw it, and he knew she saw it, but neither of them breathed a word. They climbed the stairs to Howard Mullin's office, a tight space over the feed store that smelled of old books and stale tobacco. Mullin was a wiry man in his 60s with a face so permanently soured by anger it looked set in stone. "Silas, have a seat. Who's your friend?" "This is Kora. She's in need of a lawyer." "Well, I ain't the best. But you're honest, and that's what matters." Mellon peered at Kora over his wire-rimmed glasses. "What kind of mess are you in, ma'am?" Kora sat bolt upright, her hands clenched in her lap. "The kind a judge's signature gets you into." Mullin's eyebrows shot up. She told him enough of the story, the forced marriage, the commitment, her run for freedom, and the lawman's questions. He just listened. When she was done, he polished his spectacles real slow. "Judge Edmund Ashworth of Silver Falls," he muttered. "You've heard of him?" Silas asked. "Heard of him? Son, he's got a reputation clear to the capital. He's the type who dines with the governor." "The kind no one believes is a devil," Kora added quietly. "Exactly," Mullin said, settling his glasses back on his nose. "And that makes him hard to beat in court. Understand, ma'am, we ain't just fighting a document. We're fighting his good name. In this territory, a judge's word is gospel." "So it's no use," Kora said, her voice hollowed out. "I didn't say that," Mullin leaned in. "I said it's hard. There's a world of difference. You mentioned other women there?" 43 that I knew of. Some must still be alive." "Then we need them," Mullin declared. "One woman's story can be buried. But 10 women? That ain't a story. That's a reckoning no man, not even a judge, can ride out." Silas saw a spark return to Kora's eyes, a tiny, determined flame. "How do we get to them?" she asked. "Those names you kept in your head," Mullin said. "We start there. We find their families, someone paid to put them in that place, and money always leaves a trail." Silas spoke up. "And the ledger? If it's still there, it has everything. Names, dates, even the deaths." "Proof of that would stretch a man's neck for sure," Mullin agreed. "But getting it means going back inside that place. And that ain't a job for a lawyer. That's a job for a fool or a gunman." The silence in the small office was thick. "Silas, I'm not asking you for that," Kora said, her voice firm. "I don't need you to fight him. I just need you to help me find the courage to tell my story, and have folks believe me. That's it. That's all. He looked at her, this woman who'd endured a branding, a prison, and a 100-mile trek through the wilderness and still had the strength to ask for help so politely. He met her gaze. "You'll be believed," he promised. "I'll make dead certain of it." Malian grabbed a clean sheet of paper. "All right, then. Let's have those names." Kora recited 12 names she had burned into her memory, 12 souls she carried with her. Malian wrote them all down, building the foundation of their fight. Later, as they rode home under a dark sky, Silas felt her exhaustion as she leaned against him. "You did a good thing today," he told her. "All I did was talk. Sometimes talking is the hardest part. You know that." The Montana stars burned bright and clear above them. After a long silence, she spoke. "Silas? I'm here. That new dress, I reckon I'll finish it tomorrow." "Good." Her voice hitched. "And then I think, I'm ready to take this old one off for good." He held her a little tighter. "Then I'll build you a fire when we get home." "What for?" "Because some things are meant to be burned." She didn't reply, just placed her hand over his and held on tight. They knew the fight was coming. Judge Ashworth was not a man to give up. He was a storm on the horizon, patient and terrible. And he was heading their way. It wasn't a question of if, but when. And the only real question was if they'd be standing when he hit. Before the sun was up, Silas found Kora at the kitchen table, the new blue dress laid out on her lap. She bit the thread and held up the dress. Her hands were steady, but her eyes weren't. "It's finished," she said. "It's a good dress. It's simple, but it's mine," she whispered, clutching it. "Nobody made me wear it. I made it. It's mine." "Yes, ma'am. It surely is." She met his gaze. "Go build that fire now." He nodded and went out to the yard, stacking stones and wood. When the flames were licking at the dawn air, the screen door groaned. Kora stepped out, wearing the new blue dress. It fit her right. She wasn't a new person, nothing like that. She was a woman who had finally made a stand. In her arms, she carried the old wool dress, folded up dark and heavy like a bad memory. She walked right up to the fire and stood there. Silas watched her, saw her fingers grip the cloth, her jaw set hard. "You don't have to do this," he said gently. "I have to," she answered. "If I don't do it now, I never will. I'm done wearing his shame." With that, she tossed the dress into the flames. The wool smoldered, releasing a foul smoke of fear and misery. Kora just watched, still as a statue, until it was nothing but glowing embers. She turned to him. "It's gone. I thought I'd feel free," she said, her voice breaking. "Instead, I just feel bare." Silas removed his hat, twisting the brim in his hands. "That feeling passes, Kora. I promise you." "How can you know?" "Because I burned all of Emmeline's things," he said softly. "And for days after, I felt like I'd lost her all over again, but one day the weight was just gone." Kora stared at the coals. "I want that morning. It's coming, you just have to wait on it." She nodded, wiped her cheek, and went inside. Silas didn't leave until he'd buried the last of the ashes. A few days later, word came from Emmeline. He'd found 2 of the women from her list, both alive, and had sent out careful letters. Kora worked herself to the bone, mending fences and hauling water, doing anything to keep her mind from wandering. One afternoon, Silas found her stacking hay. "You're going to work yourself into the ground." "Good," she said, dropping a bale. "Maybe then I'll finally sleep." "You ain't been sleeping," he stated more than asked. She just stood there, sweat pouring down her face, with nothing left to say. "I sleep just fine, Kora. I sleep fine, Silas. I heard you through the wall last night." She froze right where she stood. What did you hear? Enough! Her shoulders slumped. She sat down on a bale of hay and buried her face in her hands. It is the same dream. Every single night, Edmund is standing right over me with that brand. I can smell the hot metal. I can feel the heat on my skin. I try to scream, but not a sound comes out. It is like he took my voice along with everything else. Silas came and sat nearby, not too close, but close enough. You got your voice back, Kora. You used it in Malin's office. You are using it right now. That man did not take it. He just made you forget you had it for a while. She looked up, her eyes wet but fierce. What if it is not enough? What if I tell my truth and they look at me the way they all looked at Emmeline? What if they believe him just because he is a judge and I am… just what? Just some hysterical woman. The words hung between them in the dusty air. Silas turned to her. Now you listen to me. You remembered 43 names. You walked 100 miles in a wool dress in the dead of summer. You found water on land my family gave up on. You are the least hysterical person I have ever met. And I have known some mighty calm horses. She just stared at him. Then something in her expression broke open, and she let out a real laugh. It was short and startled, almost angry, like it was pulled from her. Did you just compare me to a horse? I compared you favorably to a horse. There is a big difference. She laughed again, a sound both ragged and beautiful. Silas felt something shift inside his chest. He looked away before she could see it in his eyes. Silas? Yeah. Thank you for not being careful with me. He frowned a little. What do you mean by that? The few people who knew what happened. They all treated me like I was made of glass. Like one wrong word and I would shatter into 1,000,000 pieces. You do not do that. You argue with me. You stand your ground. You just made a joke about a horse. She wiped at her eyes. You have no idea how much that means to me. He put his hat back on. Well, to be fair, Drummer is a very impressive horse. Get out of this barn. Yes, ma'am. He was almost to the door when she called out again. Silas, yeah, do not let me break. When Edmund comes, and he will come, do not let me break. He turned and looked back at her. You are not going to break, Kora. I have seen what you are made of. That man does not stand a chance. He meant every single word. But the truth was, standing there in that hot barn, Silas Hole was scared. He was not scared of Edmund Ashworth or his deputies or any piece of paper with a stamp on it. He was scared of how much he cared about the woman on that hay bale. Because caring meant you had something to lose. 4 days later, Margaret Tierney came riding out to the ranch. Silas met her at the gate. Margaret was not the type for social calls. If she was here, something was wrong. Get inside, she said, not even waiting to dismount. Both of you, in the kitchen. Margaret put her hands flat on the table. Judge Ashworth is in Ridgewater. He arrived this morning by stagecoach with 2 men. One is a United States Marshal named Greer. The other is a doctor. Kora's face lost all its color. A doctor. Dr. Parnell Webb. Ashworth told the sheriff he is a specialist in female disorders. Margaret's lip curled with disgust. He has got papers. Silas, official papers. A commitment order with a territorial stamp. A warrant for one Anne-Marie Holloway Ashworth describing her as a danger to herself and others suffering from delusions. Kora grabbed the edge of the table to steady herself. He has a warrant. He has a warrant. A marshal and a doctor ready to swear you are insane. He has thought of everything. Where is he now? Silas asked. At the hotel. He is meeting the sheriff this afternoon. Silas, he is not here to talk. He is here to collect. Kora stood up and walked to the window, wrapping her arms around herself. Kora, Silas said softly. He brought Webb, she said, her voice a whisper. Dr. Webb was the one at the facility. He is the one who held the brand. She turned around, her face strangely calm, but her eyes were not. He is the one who burned me. The kitchen was dead silent. Margaret covered her mouth with her hand. Silas felt his own hands ball into fists. Then the fool just brought a witness against himself, Silas said. He is too arrogant to see it. He did not bring a witness. He brought a weapon. Webb will say whatever Edmund tells him to. He will examine me and declare me unfit. He will sign papers saying I have to be returned to that place for my own good. And the marshal will take me back, all legal and quiet, and I will just disappear. That is not going to happen, Silas said. How? How will it not happen? He has the law on his side, Silas. He is the law. Then we break the law. No. Kora walked back to the table. No, that is what got Emmeline killed. That is you breaking Virgil's jaw. That is just anger. If we fight him with fists, we lose. We lose because he becomes the poor victim, and I become the violent woman he says I am. Silas just stared at her. She was right, and he hated it. Margaret cleared her throat. The girl has a point, Silas, but she also has something Ashworth is not counting on. What is that? Me, Margaret said, straightening up, and about a dozen other women in Ridgewater who knew that man was rotten from the start. She looked at Kora. Honey, this morning he came into my store and asked if I had seen a confused, dangerous woman. I told him no. Then he gave me a smile I have seen on men who think a woman behind a counter is just part of the furniture. He said, "Women in distress can be very convincing, ma'am. It is the nature of their weakness." He said that to my face, in my own store. What did you do? Kora asked. I smiled right back and said I hoped he found what he was looking for. Then I sent a boy to find every woman on Main Street and tell them exactly what that man said. And honey, there is not a woman in Ridgewater who will help Edmund Ashworth find his missing property. Because that is what he called you, his property. Kora closed her eyes. He always did. Silas stood up. Margaret, how much time do we have? The sheriff told him he would need a day to put a search together. That gives us until tomorrow afternoon. That is not enough time. It is what we have got. We need Mylin. I already sent for him. He will be here this evening. Silas looked at Kora. She stood there, her spine straight. She looked scared, but she also looked ready. What do you need from me? He asked her. I need you to do something harder than fighting. Just name it. I have to face him on my own. Not from behind you and not in your shadow. I need to stand right there in front of Edmund Ashworth and make him see I am not afraid of him anymore. She took a breath. Even if I am. Well, that is the bravest thing I have heard you say. It is the most frightening thing I have ever said. There is a big difference. Mlin arrived right at sundown. He brought a satchel full of papers, a bottle of whiskey, and news. I heard back from my contact, he said, laying the documents out on the kitchen table. The woman's name is Helen Cartwright. She was locked in Ashworth's facility for 14 months. She confirmed every last thing, the drugs, the restraints, the brandings, and she is willing to testify. Kora covered her mouth. Helen, she was in the room right next to me. I heard her crying every single night. She made it out, Kora. She is alive and wants to fight. That is one witness, Silas said flatly. Mylin, you told us we would need 5, maybe 10. I said that would make it a sure thing. But one witness is enough to challenge the commitment order. It is enough to get a formal hearing, and if we get that hearing, Ashworth has to show his records. The minute those books are opened up, he is a finished man. Kora whispered, if those books show what I think they show, yes, he is finished. But the hearing will be with another judge, Silas pointed out. A judge Ashworth probably has in his pocket. Lynn gave a thin, sharp smile. Not if we file for a federal hearing. Ashworth is a territorial judge. His power stops at the state line. If we can show his facility breaks federal law and false imprisonment and assault surely do, we can ask for a federal review. That takes it right out of his buddy's hands. How long will that take? Kora asked, her voice tight. Weeks, maybe months. I do not have months. He is here in town right now. I know. That is why we have to slow him down. We have to make a big enough fuss that he cannot just snatch you up and disappear. We need this whole town to see what is happening. Margaret spoke up from the doorway. The women! They all turned to look at her. I told you about the women of Ridgewater. They are not lawyers or marshals. But they are mothers and wives and sisters, and they know exactly what it looks like when a man comes to take a woman who does not want to go. What are you thinking? Malin asked. I am thinking that tomorrow morning, when Judge Ashworth strolls down Main Street to see the sheriff, he will find every woman in this town standing on that street. Not in his way, not threatening him, just watching him. Being seen. Malin shook his head. That will not stop him legally. No, but it will slow him down. A man like Edmund Ashworth cares more about his reputation than anything else. If the women of Ridgewater are all watching, he has to put on a show. He has to be charming and reasonable. And every minute he wastes play acting is another minute we can use to file for that federal hearing. Kora looked at Margaret, stunned. You would do that? You do not even know me. Margaret came over and placed her hands on Kora's shoulders. Honey, I do not need to know your whole story to see what is right in front of me. I see a woman who wore a winter dress for 3 years in the dead of summer just so nobody would see what some man did to her. I know enough. I know. Kora's control finally shattered. It was like ice cracking on a river, slow at first, then all at once. She buried her face in Margaret's shoulder and just cried, not the quiet tears she cried at night. These were deep, heavy sobs from the very bottom of her soul. Margaret just held her tight. She did not hush her or say it would be all right. She just let her shake. Silas had to step outside. He stood on the porch, gripping the railing so hard his knuckles were white, and stared up at a sky full of stars that did not care one bit about any of this. His eyes burned and his throat was tight. He could hear Kora's crying through the wall, and each sob felt like a punch to his chest. Malin came out and stood beside him. You love her, Malin said. It was not a question. Silas was quiet for a long time. What I feel does not matter right now. It matters a whole lot. Because it is going to make you do something stupid, and I need you to be smart. I am smart. You are the man who beat a shopkeeper nearly to death in broad daylight over what he did to your sister. I know that story, Silas. Everybody in Ridgewater does. That kind of anger does not just disappear, it waits. Silas turned to him. I know what I did wrong with Emmeline. I went in loud and came out with nothing but bloody hands and a dead sister. I am not going to do that again. Even when Ashworth stands right in front of you. Even when he calls her his property and flashes that smile Margaret talked about. Even when he looks at you like you are dirt under his boot. Silas's jaw went tight as a drum. Even then, good. Because tomorrow we do not need a cowboy. We need a man who can stand perfectly still while his world is on fire and trust the law to do its job. And if the law fails, Malin put a hand on Silas's shoulder. Then God help us all. But we have to try it the right way first. We owe her that much. Inside the house, the crying had stopped. Silas could hear Margaret's low, steady voice, and then Kora's, quiet and raw, but steady too. He looked at Malin. First thing in the morning, you file that petition. It is already written. I will ride for Helena at first light. And Kora? Kora stays with Margaret in town. Not here. If Ashworth sends that marshal to the ranch, you can tell him she is not here, and it will be the truth. It will buy us some time. She is not going to like that. She does not have to like it. She has to survive it. Silas nodded. He went back inside. Kora was at the table, her eyes all swollen, her hands wrapped around a cup of coffee that had gone cold. Margaret stood behind her like a guard. Kora, Silas said gently, tomorrow you are staying with Margaret in town. No, it is not safe here. Nowhere is safe. At least here I am not hiding. You are not hiding, you are getting into position. There is a difference. Kora looked at him, her eyes red and puffy. You sound like a lawyer. God forbid. He sat down across from her. Now you listen to me. Emmeline is writing to Helena to file a federal petition. That is our best shot. But it is going to take time. The only way to buy that time is to put you somewhere Ashworth cannot just quietly make you disappear. Margaret's store is right in the middle of Main Street. It is public. It is visible. If he tries to take you from there, the entire town will see it. And if the whole town does not care? Margaret spoke up. They will care. I will make good and sure of it. Kora looked between them, then closed her eyes and gave a small nod. All right, I will go to Margaret's. She opened her eyes and stared straight at Silas. But when he comes to that store, and you know he will, I'm not running to the back. I will be standing right at that counter looking him dead in the eye. I would not expect anything less. And Silas? Yeah? When this is all over, no matter how it— Before this all ends, Kora said, her voice quiet, I need you to know something. That night, you just sat on the floor outside my door. For the first time in 3 long years, I felt like a real person. Not a patient, not a wife, just a person. You gave that back to me, Silas, no matter what happens. The room fell silent. He just stared at his boots. Silas met her eyes, feeling the world shift right under him. Every wall he had built since his Emmeline died began to shake. Nothing is going to happen to you, he said, his voice low and firm. Not while I'm still drawing breath. She almost managed to smile. Almost. And in that one word was everything they couldn't say and everything they already knew. Morning would bring Edmund Ashworth, and he'd walk down Main Street with the law on his arm, sure as the sunrise. But Kora Holloway would be waiting, not running, wearing her own dress. Judge Ashworth came walking down Main Street at 9:30, the sun already beaten down. He moved like a man who'd never been told no in his life. He had Marshal Greer on his left and Dr. Parnell Webb on his right, with the local sheriff trailing behind them like a stray dog. Ashworth stopped cold. Every woman in Ridgewater was standing on that street. Not in a line, just there, on their porches and doorways, leaning on posts with their arms crossed, just watching. Margaret Tierney stood right in front of her general store. Next to her, Ada Pike held a broom she had no intention of using. Old Mrs. Harlan sat in a kitchen chair, knitting like the judge was just a bad spill on her good tablecloth. Ashworth tipped his hat to Margaret. Morning, ma'am. It's a lovely town you have here. It was, Margaret said flatly. He glanced past her, his eyes searching the store. I'm looking for my wife. Small woman, brown hair. She ain't well, I'm afraid. Confused. So your deputy told us last week, Margaret said. And still nobody's seen her. That seems mighty peculiar. What strikes me as peculiar, Judge, Margaret said, her voice steady, is a man who travels 300 miles with a marshal and a doctor to fetch his wife. Ashworth's smile got a little tighter. My wife is ill, Mrs. Tierney. She needs care. Surely a husband's concern isn't so strange. I can understand a great many things, Margaret replied, holding his gaze. The street was dead quiet. Ashworth finally turned to the sheriff. Sheriff Boone, I have a warrant here. I'd like to begin a search of this town. Boone shifted his boots in the dust. Judge, I ain't got a single reason to think the woman you're after is here. Then a search should be quick. And if folks here don't want their homes searched, this warrant allows it. That warrant is for Silver Falls. This here is Ridgewater. Ashworth's smile disappeared completely. Sheriff, are you telling me you plan to get in my way? I'm telling you I intend to keep the peace in my town. And right now, 3 strangers showing up demanding to search homes is disturbing that peace. Boone stood a little taller then. He was scared. Kora could see it plain as day, standing behind the counter in Margaret's store. He was scared, but he was still standing. I'll need to check that warrant with the territorial office, Boone said. That'll take a day or 2. That's unacceptable. It's the law, Judge, even way out here. Ashworth stared at Boone for a long, hard moment. Then he turned his head slow and deliberate, and his eyes found Kora through the store window. She felt the floor drop away. Every part of her screamed to run, to hide. That old terror rose up in her chest like a flash flood. But she didn't move. She stood there in her blue dress and stared right back at the man who had branded her. Her hands were shaking so bad she had to press them flat on the counter, but she held his gaze. A slow, knowing smile spread across Ashworth's face. He turned back to the sheriff. Take your time, Sheriff Boone. I am a patient man. Then he turned and walked back to the hotel, his men following behind. Margaret came back inside the store. You all right? No, Kora whispered. But I'm still standing. That's all that matters. He saw me, Margaret. He knows. Of course he knows. This was never a search, Kora. It was a performance. He wanted you to see him, to be afraid. Well, it worked. Did it? Because from where I stood, it looked like a man who figured his wife would crumble, and instead he watched her stand tall. That shook him. The door opened, and Silas walked in, his face like stone. I was across the street. I saw you stand your ground. Silas, he'll come for me. He won't wait for Boone. Mullen is already writing for Helena, Silas said. He files that federal petition and Ashworth's warrant ain't worth the paper it's on. Until then, you stay right here. And you don't let that man see you flinch again. I didn't flinch. No, ma'am, Silas said. You surely did not. A couple of hours later, Dr. Parnell Webb walked into the store all by himself. He was a thin man with watery eyes who moved real quiet like a snake in the grass. He picked up a can of crackers, looked it over, and set it back down. Afternoon, Margaret said. Can I help you with something? Just looking. He smiled a smile that was meant to be kind, but was anything but. His eyes landed right on Kora, who was stacking jars at the back. My, he said, that's a lovely dress. Kora froze. She didn't turn around. Blue suits you, Webb went on. Much better than the gray did. Kora finally turned and looked straight at him. In his pale eyes, she saw it all. He remembered her, and he was enjoying her fear. I don't believe we've been introduced, Kora said, her voice somehow steady. Oh, I think we have. Patients often forget things. It's a symptom of the condition, you see. Margaret stepped up. I think you'd better leave my store. I'm a customer, ma'am. No, you're not. You're a man who came in here to scare one of my employees, and I won't have it. Webb's smile never changed. He pulled a folded paper from his coat and laid it on the counter. This is a medical evaluation order. It says the woman known as Anne-Marie Holloway Ashworth must submit to an examination. Refusing is just more proof of her condition. Margaret didn't even look at the paper. I said get out. Webb looked at Kora one last time. The examination will happen, Anne-Marie, sooner or later, and we both know what I'll find. He leaned in, his voice a low hiss. We both remember, don't we? And something inside Kora finally snapped. It wasn't the old scared breaking. This was something new, something hot and sharp as a razor. I remember everything, Doctor, she said, her voice quiet as iron. I remember the room and the restraints. I remember the smell of the brand heating in the fire. I remember you holding my shoulder down while it burned my skin. I remember the names of 12 women who died in your care. Webb's smile flickered. I remember Helen Cartwright, who screamed your name every night. And I remember your little book, page 47, Patient Ruth Beckons. Treatment, prolonged submersion. Outcome, expired. Kora took a step closer. The color drained from the doctor's face. You wrote expired like she was a jug of sour milk. So yes, doctor, I remember. The real question is, are you ready for everyone else in this territory to remember it too? Webb snatched the paper off the counter and left so fast the door banged shut behind him. He practically ran back to the hotel. Margaret let out a long breath. Lord have mercy. He is scared, Kora said. Her voice was steady even though she was shaking. Edmund promised him this would be a quiet little trip. Come in, get the patient, and go home. No fuss, no questions. But it is not quiet anymore. No, ma'am, it is not. Silas came in from the back room where he had been listening. Kora, that thing you said about the ledger, page 47. I memorized every page I laid eyes on. How many pages did you see? 16. Edmund left the drawer unlocked one night. I had maybe 20 minutes. I read as fast as I could and burned every single word into my mind. 16 pages of names and dates and treatments. 16 pages of solid evidence. If Malin gets that hearing and Helen Cartwright testifies, and I can tell them what I saw, dates, names, everything, a federal judge will have to investigate. The records will either match my story or they will not. And if Edmund got rid of the ledger, well, that is a crime all on its own. Silas just stared at her. You have been planning this. I have been planning this for 3 years. Every night in that dress, every single nightmare. I was not just remembering, Silas, I was building my case. The afternoon got ugly, not with fists, but with paper. Marshal Greer showed up at Margaret's store around 4 o'clock holding another warrant. This one was from Ashworth himself, ordering Anne-Marie Holloway Ashworth to be immediately turned over to a Dr. Parnell Webb for a medical evaluation. Greer was a tall fellow with a long face and weary eyes. He did not look like he enjoyed his job. He laid the warrant on the counter. Ma'am, I have to serve this. I understand you can come along voluntarily. If you do not, I am authorized to... To do what? Silas stepped forward. Drag her out of this store in front of everybody? Mr. Holt, I do not want any trouble. Then do not come bringing trouble in here. Sheriff Boone appeared in the doorway, breathing hard like he had been running. Greer, you hold on. I just got a wire from Helena. Everybody went still. Boone held up a slip of paper. The federal court in Helena has received a petition challenging the commitment order for Anne-Marie Holloway Ashworth. Until they review it, all territorial actions are on hold. The commitment are suspended. Greer blinked. Suspended? That means your warrant is not worth the paper it is printed on. Not until a federal court rules on the matter. Judge Ashworth is not going to like that. Judge Ashworth does not have a choice. Federal law trumps territorial law. That is in the Constitution, Marshal. Kora sank into a chair, her legs giving out. She covered her face with her hands and took a deep, shaky breath, feeling a knot inside her chest finally loosen after 3 long years. Silas put a hand on her shoulder, and she reached up to hold it. It is not over, she whispered. No, he said, but the game has changed. He is not the only one with papers now. Greer left with the useless warrant. Through the window, they watched him go back to the hotel. 5 minutes later, they heard something shatter from a second-floor window. It was the sound of a man who had never been told no in his life. Margaret poured 4 glasses of whiskey. I would say this calls for a drink. It calls for 10 drinks, Boone said, but I will start with 1. They drank. Kora held her glass, her mind already working. He will not leave, she said quietly. The suspension just buys us. Edmund is not just going to leave Ridgewater. He will stick around looking for a new way to hurt me. He will spread lies, paint me as some kind of dangerous woman, and try to poison this town against me before the hearing even starts. Let him. Margaret added that the womenfolk had already made up their minds. But Edmund is a smooth talker. He will be at the saloon buying drinks and at the church shaking hands, spinning some sad tale about his poor sick wife. And some people will swallow it whole, because it is always easier to believe a judge than a woman with scars. That truth hung heavy in the air. Silas put his glass down. Then we are not waiting. We are taking the fight to him. How? Someone asked. We need more people willing to speak. Helen Cartwright is one. But there are others, Kora said, her voice like steel. I am not just going to find them. I am bringing every last one of them right here. Every woman who survived that place. We are going to have a line of witnesses so long that Edmund Ashworth will choke on it. That will take time. Then I had better ride fast, she said, standing up. She went over to Silas, putting her hands on his chest so suddenly it made him go still. You come back, she told him. I always do. Your sister never got the chance to say that to you. So I am saying it. Come back. He covered her hands with his own. I will come back, Kora. That is one promise I will not break. She looked him in the eye for a long moment, then straightened up and turned to Margaret. While he is gone, we have got work to do. What kind? The kind that will give a judge nightmares. I have 16 pages of that monster's ledger memorized. I am going to write it all down, and then we are sending copies to every newspaper within 200 miles. Margaret grinned. Now you are thinking. Silas rode out that night with a list of names and a map from Kora's memory. He had 6 towns to visit and 6 chances to build a wall of truth so high that no man's reputation could ever get over it. Kora stood on the porch and watched him disappear into the dusk. She did not cry. She simply went inside, sat down at Margaret's table, and picked up a pen. Page 1. Patient Mary Ellen Cook, admitted September 14, 1862. Diagnosis: hysteria, outcome transferred. Page 2. Patient Louise Dennison, admitted January 3, 1863. Diagnosis: moral insanity. Outcome: expired. The names just kept coming. And far away, Silas was riding hard through the twilight, racing against a judge who was not used to losing. He came back on the 8th day with trail dust on his clothes and 4 women following behind him. Kora was at the counter when she heard the horses. She looked out and saw Silas, thinner but sitting tall. Behind him was a wagon, and in it was a small woman with familiar eyes. Kora dropped her pen and ran out the door. Helen Cartwright climbed down from the wagon, looking older and smaller than Kora remembered. When she saw Kora, her whole face seemed to break open with relief. "Anne-Marie," she whispered, her voice cracking. "You are alive." "I am alive," Kora said. "Ruth pushed me out the window." Tears filled Helen's eyes. Ruth did not make it out. "I know." They held each other in that dusty street, 2 women who had survived the same hell. The sound of Helen's crying brought the neighbors out onto their porches. Silas got off his horse, his eyes meeting Kora's. He looked exhausted, but there was something urgent in his expression. "We need to talk," he said. Inside, Silas introduced the women. There was Agnes Dooley from Dry Fork, who lost her daughter in Ashworth's facility. Sarah Jane Mitchum, whose husband put her there to steal her inheritance. And Clara Noonan, who had escaped 2 years before Kora. "Every single one of them is ready to tell her story," Silas said. "To who?" Kora asked. "The hearing has not even been scheduled. It is now." Silas pulled out a folded paper. "A federal judge named Harlan Pierce is coming to Ridgewater in 3 days. 3 days? Kora sank into a chair. "Edmund is already making his move," Silas said, looking at Margaret. "He has been busy, has he not?" Margaret crossed her arms. "He sure has. The judge has been buying drinks for about half the men in town. He gave $50 to the church and told anyone who would listen that his poor wife is being held by a violent man with a past. Some folks are eating it up." But Margaret's jaw was set like stone. "The women of this town are not so easily fooled. Not a single one." Kora looked over at Helen. "Can you do this? Can you stand before a judge and tell him what happened?" Helen looked up, her eyes wet but steady. "I have been silent for 6 years, Anne-Marie." She pulled up her sleeve, showing a jagged scar shaped like an H. "6 years of hiding this. I am done being quiet." Next, Clara Noonan spoke, her voice shaking but full of fight. "He told my family I was suicidal. All I did was tell my father I would not marry the man he chose. That was my crime." Then Agnes Dooley, the oldest and angriest, slammed her hand on the table. "My daughter was only 19. He took her, and I never saw her again. Then he sent me a bill for burying my own child in a ditch like she was nothing." In the quiet that followed, Kora reached out and took Agnes's hand. "We will make them all hear her name." "You are darn right we will." The 3 days that followed felt like an eternity. Edmund fought them at every turn. On the first day, he tried to get the case thrown out, but that move was shut down in a matter of hours. The objection was denied. On the second day, Dr. Webb himself approached Helen right on the street. Margaret told Kora about it later. He tried to intimidate her, threatening to reveal her private records from the facility. But Helen just stared him down. She said, "I only had to be restrained because I was trying to stop you from hurting Ruth Beckons, the woman you let die." Then she just walked away. "He is trying to break them one by one," Kora whispered. "But he is failing." On the third day, the morning of the hearing, Edmund made his final move. Silas was at the ranch loading the wagon when he heard a horse approaching, coming way too fast. He saw Sheriff Boone pull up and knew it was trouble. The man's shirt was soaked with sweat, his face pale as a ghost. "Silas?" We have a real problem. What kind of problem, Boone? The kind that ruins a man. Ashworth filed a stack of charges against you this morning. Assault, kidnapping, and corrupting a ward of the court. He even got Doc Webb to sign off on it, saying your influence on Kora is just manipulating a sick woman. Silas stared, not believing it. You have to be kidding me. I wish I was. Greer has a warrant for your arrest, and the hearing is today. Ashworth is not trying to win the hearing. He is just trying to make sure I am not there for it. He knows that without me, Kora will be all alone. She is not alone, Silas. She has Mlynn and Margaret and all those other women. She needs me there, Boone. If you ride into town, you will be in a jail cell before you ever see the courthouse. Silas gripped the railing, that old fire burning in his gut, and he pushed it down hard. There is another way into town, he said. I can take the back road past the mill. That way I can get to the courthouse from behind. And if Greer spots you, then I will be the best-dressed man in the county jail. He looked straight at the sheriff. Are you going to try and stop me? Boone held his gaze for a long moment, then turned his horse. I did not see you this morning, Silas. I rode all the way out here and found nobody home. I appreciate that, Sheriff. Just do not make me regret it. Silas took that back road. He left his horse behind the feed store and slipped through an alley to the courthouse's rear entrance where Mlynn was waiting. You are late, Mlynn said. Seems I am a wanted man. I heard. We can worry about that later. Right now, you get inside, sit down, and try to look unimportant. The hearing room was packed to the rafters. The women of Ridgewater took up the entire left side. On the right sat Edmund Ashworth, looking like the perfect worried husband with Doc Webb and Greer beside him. At the front sat Judge Harlan Pierce, an old man with eyes that saw everything. He looked like a man who had spent his whole life listening to lies and had gotten real good at picking out the truth. This hearing is to review the commitment of one Anne-Marie Holloway Ashworth, Pierce announced. Mrs. Ashworth, are you here? Kora stood, tall and straight in a simple blue dress. I am here, Your Honor. And you have a lawyer? Howard Mlynn, sir, from right here in Ridgewater. Mlynn stood up, adjusting his spectacles. Your Honor, my client was sent to that place without a trial, without a doctor's opinion, and without her permission. She was held there for 11 months. During that time, she was drugged, tied down, and, he paused, branded with a hot iron by Dr. Parnell Webb, on the direct order of her own husband. A shock went through the courtroom. Pierce raised a hand. Silence. Those are some mighty serious charges, Mr. Mlynn. Yes, Your Honor, and we have the witnesses to prove them. Kora went first. She told her story from the very beginning, her voice clear and steady. She talked about the wedding, the first time Edmund laid a hand on her, and the ledger she found locked in his desk. She described being taken from her bed and locked in a room with no windows. When she spoke of the branding, the smell of it, the sound, a few women in the gallery gasped. Agnes Dooley just sobbed quietly. Through it all, Ashworth never flinched. He just watched his wife, calm as you please, like a man who knew his word was worth more than hers. Then Helen spoke, showing the scar on her arm from the restraints. Clara Noonan and Sarah Jane Mitchum followed. One by one they stood and told their truths, and with every story the air in that room got heavier, like a storm about to break. Agnes was the last to speak. She did not have scars, just a name. My daughter's name was Lily, she said, her voice trembling. Lily Ann Dooley. She was only 19. She loved to sing, even though she could not carry a tune in a bucket. Judge Ashworth told me she died of a fever. He charged me $12 to bury her, and I paid it. I paid to have my own child put in a hole I will never even find. The room was deathly quiet. Pierce took off his glasses and polished them with a shaky hand. Your Honor, Ashworth's lawyer finally said, these are sad stories, but there is no proof. There are records, Kora said, her voice cutting through the silence. Everyone turned to look at her. There is a ledger. It is in a locked drawer in Judge Ashworth's office. I saw 16 pages of it, and I memorized them all, names, dates, and what happened to them. 12 of them were marked expired. 12 women are dead. That is just hearsay, the lawyer snapped. Then open the drawer, Kora challenged him. If I'm lying, it will prove it. But if I am telling the truth, it will match everything I said. Pierce looked at Ashworth. Judge Ashworth, is there such a ledger? For the first time, a crack appeared in Ashworth's calm mask. It was just a twitch in his jaw, but everyone saw it. The facility keeps standard records, he said carefully. Then you will have no objection to a federal inspection of those records. There was a pause, just a second too long. Of course not. Then I am ordering one. In the meantime, the commitment order for Anne-Marie Holloway Ashworth is cancelled. She is a free woman. Any attempt to bother her will be considered kidnapping. Kora's knees nearly gave out, but Malin caught her arm. Furthermore, Pierce went on, staring right at Ashworth, the charges against Silas Hole are dismissed. They were filed based on an order that no longer exists, by a judge whose own house is about to be searched by federal marshals. Your Honor, this is an outrage. Ashworth started, jumping to his feet. Sit down, Judge Ashworth. Pierce's voice was like thunder. You are not on the bench today. You are in my courtroom. And in my courtroom, you will sit down when I am talking. Ashworth sank into his chair, his face as white as a sheet. Pierce stood. This hearing is over. Mrs. Ashworth, you are free to go. The room exploded with cheers. The women swarmed Kora. Margaret hugged her so tight she could barely breathe. Agnes held her face and whispered, You did it. You did it for my Lily. Kora just cried and smiled at the same time. Through the crowd, she saw Silas standing near the back wall, holding his hat. He was not pushing his way through. He just stood there, solid and steady. She walked right to him. You came back, she said softly. I told you I would. But you were wanted for kidnapping. Not anymore. She laughed, a real, true laugh. She put her hands on his chest and could feel his heart beating strong and fast. Silas Hole, she said, you are the most stubborn and patient man I have ever known. Yes, ma'am. I am not done, she said with a small smile. You sat on a cold floor all night for me. You dug a well just because I asked. You rode all over Montana to bring back strangers to fight for a woman you barely knew. Her voice shook a little. Why? He looked down at her. Because you deserved someone who stayed. And right there in the middle of the courthouse, she kissed him. She kissed him and he kissed her back. And the whole room went quiet for a second, and then it erupted in applause. 3 weeks later, the federal marshals came back with the ledger. Every single page was just as Kora had described. Edmund Ashworth was arrested in his hotel room, still wearing his fine suit, still claiming he had done nothing wrong. They put Parnell Webb in cuffs that same day and shut that place down for good. 14 women walked out into the sunlight. Just like Kora said, Agnes Dooley found her daughter's grave behind the building. She finally brought Lily home to bury her proper, with a headstone, fresh flowers, and all the words she had held in her heart for 5 long years. Malin suddenly had more work than he knew what to do with. Soon, Kora's story was on the front page, and it spread like a prairie fire, inspiring women all over the territory to finally speak their own truth. One late August evening, after the heat had finally broken, Kora and Silas stood together on the porch. Malin says the trial is in Helena, she said. He wants me to tell my story again. Will you? He asked. Every time they ask. For Ruth, for Lily, for all of them. Silas reached out and took her hand. Kora, you never did tell me about the blue dress. She looked down at the simple cotton dress she had sewn by lamplight in what felt like a different lifetime. Her hand smoothed the fabric. Because when I was in that room, the one with no windows, I would close my eyes and try my hardest to remember what the sky looked like. That soft, pale blue right before the sun gets too bright. I promised myself that if I ever got out, I would wear that color every single day so I would never forget what freedom felt like. Silas squeezed her hand. You are free now. I know. She leaned against him. But I am more than free, Silas. I am home. He put his arm around her. They stood there, two people who had both failed to save someone they loved and had carried that failure like a stone. But somehow, through stubbornness and finding water in a dry land, they had found a way to set that weight down. Not to forget, but to carry it differently, together. And in that small Montana town, a plain blue dress hung on a line in the summer wind. It was simple. It was hers. This content was carefully researched, developed, and manually edited by our team to deliver meaningful stories with valuable life lessons. Every narrative is crafted to entertain, inspire, and empower our audience. We believe that great stories can change lives, and we are committed to bringing you content that matters. Thank you for being part of our community.